Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with more King Arthur Knight's Tale, and this time I want to talk about Sir Bruno Lenore. One of my, in fact, no, out of all the tyrant characters whose storylines I have seen, his recruitment mission is by far my favorite. This guy is absolutely brutal and ruthless. And I really enjoy playing with him on my team. So let's first go ahead and go through the traits. He has tyranny. He gets +1 loyalty after every other tyrant hero in the round table, making it very easy, as you can see, to max out his loyalty if you're a tyrant. He has tax collector. While appointed as Grand Master at the round table, he grants 120 gold after each mission. So I stuck him right into that slot. It's going to help you get a lot more money. And then finally, he has hated, which means healing injuries cost 100% more for this hero. So what? They don't have to like him. I like him quite a bit. Let's go ahead and go through his abilities. First up, he has Strike, which deals 100% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy. You can upgrade this where it's going to do bleeding damage, do an additional 15% damage. It's going to reduce cooldowns after killing with Strike, and it can cause 20% vulnerability for a particular target. He's going to be using Strike a lot, so you definitely want to go ahead and pick up all of these upgrades. Next up is Defensive Stance. The hero gains 10 armor for 1 turn, and how much armor you get from this skill actually increases as you increase in level. As far as upgrades, you can get an additional 30% physical debuff resist. You can get 17 temporary HP. You can reduce the cooldown for defensive stance. And while defensive stance is active, the hero loses only 50% armor from attacks. So I definitely would say you want to pick this up. It's really nice as a frontline fighter to have kind of a get out of jail free card where when you know you're going to be hit up, you can pop this on and get some additional protection. I would definitely recommend you take these upgrades over here, the reducing cooldown and losing only 50% armor. The physical debuff resist, I feel like for physical debuff, you really need to get up to around 40 or 50% in order to really see a change. If you're going to take more physical debuff resist stuff down here, then this is worth it. If not, I would say it's probably not really worth it for you to pick it up here. And then the 17 temporary HP, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just not worth putting a skill point into it. It does increase per level. It does give you some additional protection. But the way I use my champion, if they're in this type of situation where they're going to get hit up, I pop this on, they're protected for 1 turn, and then my next turn, I'm focusing on clearing up whatever's in front of my champion so they aren't in that position the next turn, as opposed to my defender who, if he's surrounded, that's cool. I'll let that happen for a few turns while I'm dealing with everybody else. And so consequently, I don't feel the need to give him so much padding and room because he shouldn't always be surrounded. But if you play your champion as someone who's kind of always surrounded and always in those bad situations, then this upgrade might be worth it for you. Next up is Cleave. Deals 75% weapon damage to every unit in a 3-tile wide area. You can upgrade it where it does an additional 15% weapon damage, causes enemies to bleed, does an additional 20% weapon damage to the target that's in the center, and it causes knockback. Definitely feel like you should pick up Cleave. It's one of the abilities that the champion has that lets them do damage to multiple people, and you're going to need to use it quite a bit. These 2 upgrades up top are definitely worth it. You want to pick up the 15% weapon damage immediately. The bleeding, you could probably wait until around level 7 or 8, because when the game first starts, you're running into a lot of enemies that are immune to both poison and bleeding. But by level 7 or 8, you're running into a lot more variety of enemies, and most of them will be susceptible to bleeding. So this will make a lot more sense. For the bottom upgrades, you can go ahead and pick up this 20% weapon damage to the center, but it's not really something you can plan around. There's just going to be a lot of times where the center is empty. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad choice, but it's not one that you need to rush because, again, Just because you use Cleave doesn't mean you're going to make use of this upgrade. And then for knockback, I personally don't like knockback on my frontline fighters. I want them to hold the aggro and ensure that the enemies don't get to my archer or my sage or wherever else I have back there that I don't want to be in a melee situation. However, if you like your champion to roam, to kind of be able to go around the battlefield and pick and choose specific targets, then having knockback is useful because it's one of the few ways to break engagement without taking an opportunity attack. So based on your playstyle, you can decide if this upgrade makes sense to you. Next up is Rage. Gain 10% stackable weapon damage for 2 turns after every kill. You can upgrade this where you're going to get an additional 5% weapon damage bonus for Rage. The effect is going to last an additional turn. The hero gains 1 AP for each kill while Rage's effect is active. And you're going to regain 3 HP for each kill while Rage's effect is active. Rage is an absolutely awesome power that I usually end up ignoring for other things, but it's definitely not necessarily a bad pickup. And I know there are some people who have builds that kind of revolve around getting that additional 1 AP because between Cleave and Earthshaker, which we'll go over later, you do have ways as a champion to kill multiple enemies in your turn, which is going to stack up the AP that you're able to get and possibly allow you to chain multiple kills together in a single turn. So because of that, there are a lot of people who love Rage. Me personally, I'm much more into the active skills. Like I like the idea of based on the situation, I have a skill that fits with that particular point in time. But if you decide you like the way Rage works, I'm definitely not against going ahead and picking it up. Next up is Juggernaut. The hero gains 5% cumulative weapon damage for each tile of movement until the end of your turn. I would absolutely recommend that you pick this up. As a champion, you don't have any movement skills. So you don't have running charge, you don't have teleport, you don't have some of the ways that other classes use in order to close in on an enemy. So you're almost always walking. And this ability means that when you're walking, you're also gaining weapon damage, making you much more effective against the enemy when you finally reach them. Next up is extra bleeding. You're going to do an additional 50% weapon damage for bleeding effects. Again, bleeding effects are not worth it until around level 7 or 8. But at that time, you're going to get a greater variety of enemies and bleeding becomes much more powerful. If you decide to pick them up here, then it's worth it to just go ahead and get extra bleeding as well. And then finally, we have Strength. The hero does 10% more weapon damage. This is a no-brainer. You definitely want to go ahead and pick that up. Next up, we have Power Attack. Deals 150% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy with 15% armor breaking. This is very nice, but what really makes it awesome is the upgrade Initiator. An additional 25% weapon damage for Power Attack if the targeted unit has full HP and full vitality. These type of enemies that have armor and has also not been targeted yet are very, very common because the game throws so many enemies at you at one time. Consequently, you're going to get a lot of use out of Initiator, and it makes it well worth it to pick up Power Attack. As far as the other upgrades, you can reduce the AP cost by 1, you can cause it to do 30% vulnerability, and you can cause it to stun enemies. Now, I would say definitely these 3 upgrades are worth it. This 4th upgrade, I would say it's not worth it on normal because most of the time when you hit these types of enemies, if they have not been harmed and they have armor, you could just take them right out. On harder difficulties, that's not necessarily the case. So it helps a lot to be able to stun them for 1 turn, even though that increases the AP cost from 4 to 5. So depending upon your difficulty and your playstyle, you can decide if this upgrade works for you. But for me, playing on normal, most of the time, I ignore this. Next up is Earthshaker. Earthshaker deals 120% weapon damage to a chosen unit and everyone along its path. It cannot be blocked. You can upgrade it where it's going to increase the tile range by 2 and it'll do an additional 15% weapon damage. Definitely recommend you get Earthshaker and these 2 upgrades. It can also do knockback to targets. I've already covered why I don't do knockback, but again, you can make your own decision. and it can cause enemies to be slowed. Slow is also something that I don't bother putting on enemies. I really don't care how quickly they'll close in, especially with a champion. I want them to be closer so that it's easier for my champion to deal with them. But you might be working on a team where there's somebody like a Sage or an Arcanist who does more damage to enemies that are slow. And again, this is going to hit multiple targets. So if you have something where the synergy of the team is helped by how many enemies are slowed, then it's going to make sense for you to go ahead and pick up this upgrade. Next up is Vengeance. When an enemy hits the hero gains 10% weapon damage against that enemy until the end of the encounter. You can upgrade it where the hero gains +2 AP if they have no HP. The hero starts their turn with 1 AP if they received at least 2 hits during the enemy turn. The less HP the hero has, the more weapon damage the hero deals. And the hero gains 2 unbreakable armor while they have no HP. I don't pick up any of this. One, I do not like taking abilities that depend upon you having no HP. That's a terrible situation that you really don't want to deal with. And then number 2, I try to set up things on the battlefield where the champion is hitting enemies before enemies hit him. So having something that revolves around how many times he gets hit doesn't really help me either. So for my personal play style and the difficulty that I play on, I ignore all this. You can decide for your own situation whether or not it works for you. Next up is Armorer. The hero loses 1 less AP from heavy armor sigils. Absolutely want to take this. It can oftentimes be the difference between being able to attack once or being able to attack twice during a turn. So absolutely worth your time to pick this up. And then finally, Robust. You can get an additional 10% vitality and HP from armor sigils, accessories, and trinkets, and an additional 10% physical debuff resist. If you are having issues with him getting hit a lot or going down or things of that nature, and you want to beef him up, by all means, go ahead and take this. It's not a bad use of 2 skill points. Quick note before we move on to the 3rd tier. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. I use this information to determine what kind of content my channel is enjoying, and it helps my videos spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. Okay, so starting on the 3rd tier, let's go ahead and go to Whirlwind. Deals 120% weapon damage to adjacent units. You can upgrade this where it does bleeding, knockback, its AP cost is reduced by 1, bringing the AP cost to 5, and you can increase the weapon damage by 15%. Me personally, I ignore Whirlwind. 1, because most of the time, my champion is not being attacked from all sides. Usually I have them positioned where enemies are coming from the front. The only exception to that is, again, those times where I kind of purposefully put him in a position where he's going to get lit up, and that's when I go ahead and activate defensive stance. But other than that, he's only getting that kind of attention from the front, and I just use Cleave. Also, I don't like the AP cost. All of your other abilities basically cost 4 AP, but this one costs 5, even with the upgrade. I'm not a fan of that. And so because of those 2 reasons, I ignore this. But again, if you play differently, if you're always being surrounded, if you need another area of effect power, this is not a bad pickup at all. Next up is Damage Focus. The hero gains 5% weapon damage per unspent AP from the previous turn. You definitely want to go ahead and pick this up, and more specifically, you want to get Focus Watch. AP spent on Overwatch counts as unspent for the purposes of the Damage Focus skill. So basically what can happen during a fight is your champion can only walk so far, and they won't be able to actually reach an enemy. You go as far as you can, and then you activate Overwatch in the hopes that an enemy walks towards you and you automatically get that free attack. But sometimes, for whatever reason, enemies won't walk towards you, and that's essentially wasted AP. So what this allows you to do is convert that AP you spent on Overwatch and use it for additional damage the next time that you strike an enemy. Very, very useful. I highly recommend that you go ahead and pick this up. For the other upgrades, the hero gains 2 armor per 3 unspent AP left in the previous turn. The hero gains 3% weapon damage per unspent AP left in the previous turn. And then the hero gains 1 AP per 3 unspent AP left in the previous turn. I think whether or not these are worth it is determined by whether or not you play as someone who tries to bank a lot of AP. For some people, they prefer to use that AP for movement and just get as far as they can, as close as they can to the action, and move on to the next turn. Other people are more conservative with their AP and say, I only go as far as I can go while still using an attack ability. And if I can't get any farther, then I just sit there till the next turn. So how good this is for you kind of depends on your play style. But definitely, if you're the type of person who's saving a lot of AP all the time, these are going to be worth picking up. Next up is melee expertise. While outnumbered, the hero gains 1 unbreakable armor and 5 mental debuff resist and physical debuff resist for each adjacent enemy. The amount of unbreakable armor gained increases by 1 every 10 levels. You absolutely want to pick this up, but mainly for the upgrade Killing Spree. When killing a unit, the hero automatically attacks another adjacent enemy with a free strike skill. This is absolutely awesome and absolutely amazing to see, and can allow you to really wipe out some groups as long as you have enough AP to keep swinging. So I would definitely recommend you pick up these two. As far as the other upgrades, while outnumbered, the hero gains 5% weapon damage for each adjacent enemy. While outnumbered, the hero starts their turn with 1 AP for each adjacent enemy above 2. All cooldowns are reduced by 1 turn if the hero starts their turn outnumbered. Me personally, again, with my champion, usually I'm picking out of the way targets. He doesn't get outnumbered very often, so I don't bother picking these 3 upgrades up. But if you're the type you like just throwing your champion into the fray, letting them get surrounded by a bunch of people, these upgrades are definitely well worth it and will be worth your time. Next up, extra stun, plus 50% efficiency for stun and slow effects. Obviously, I completely ignore this because I don't use the stun and slow effects that are available to me. And frankly, even if I did, they both only apply to one particular skill. I'm not sure this really buys you that much. Like, do you really need either of those to be extra effective? I would say no. I don't feel like this is worth it really, regardless of whether or not you pick them up, but you can make your own decision. Hardened armor, reduce armor loss by 20%. Absolutely want to pick this up. It's going to make your champion more tanky. Regardless of your playstyle, this is worth it. And then finally, an additional 20% weapon damage for every skill that deals damage in an area. I would say this is worth picking up regardless of whether or not you have Whirlwind. Even if you're just using Earthshaker and Cleave, for me, my characters are using these 2 skills all the time, like almost every single fight. And so I feel like it's definitely worth having this, regardless of your play style. And those are the abilities for Sir Bruno Noir. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.